Now, a quarter century on from the day it began, Rwanda is remembering the more than 800,000 victims of the genocide. The campaign of killing targeted the Tutsi people. Most were beaten or hacked to death with machetes.
This is the light of remembrance.
Well, President Paul Kagame began the commemorations by lighting a flame at the Kigali Genocide Memorial. More than 250,000 of the victims are believed to be buried at the site.
The only conclusion to draw from Rwanda's story is profound hope for our world. No community is beyond repair, and the dignity of the people is never fully extinguished.
Well, Andrew Simmons joins us now live from Kigali. And Andrew, those commemoration events still very much underway and likely to continue for some time. What more can you tell us?
Quite a lot. The situation now is that the main speeches have been made by those on the rostrum in that convention centre. You heard from the Rwandan president there. And now there's going to be a walk organised, a walk of remembrance from the Rwandan parliament to this position, the National Stadium, which is likely to be filled with people in about 3 to 4 hours' time. There will be a series of community events here. This will be really the gathering for the people, the real sharing of an atmosphere here. And that will be followed by a nighttime vigil, a candlelight here, when people will pray and remember and try to think forward. Just adding to Kagame's words there were earlier references from Jean-Claude Juncker, the President of the European Commission. He spoke of the horrors that Europe faced in the 20th century, an obvious reference to World War II and the Holocaust. And he went on to say that this event in Africa was, there could be no comfort. Nothing can heal the wounds, he said, of the victims. He said that the people of Rwanda are courageous. We will never forget them. What we heard, though, from the Belgian Prime Minister, Charles Michel there, he actually made a reference to the failure of the international community to stop the genocide. A reference there to Belgium. No reference in words to France, but France also implicated, it would seem, and the United Nations in not actually responding to the genocide when it started happening. In fact, the United Nations did actually pull out troops. There were 12 Belgian troops killed, but there was no recognition of what was a pre-planned, a preconceived act on the part of the Hutus to kill and rape and maim on a mass scale. He's actually apologized for the slowness, as he described it, of Belgium to react to events. So they're really quite a graphic admission of failure, effectively, by Belgium, which was, of course, the former colonial power that ruled Rwanda before it became independent in 1962. Now the preparations are going on here. There is a theme to this whole genocide event, the commemoration of 25 years, that's aimed at the youth, that's aimed at the next generation. As Kagame said, every day we learn to forgive and not forget. And Kagame highlighted that 60% of the population now in Rwanda was born after the genocide. So we have a post-genocide generation looking forward. The key to it all, though, the colossal job that's still underway and a long way to go, is reintegrating the killers and the victims and the new generation. That is a massive process. 2 million people have been before the Gacaca courts in Rwanda. That's a series of justice that's now over. There are a whole host of programs for forgiveness for those who have served jail sentences to ask for forgiveness from their victims face to face. There are communities where killers and victims live together effectively in the same communities. It is quite an ambitious plan to do that, but this is part of a whole series of initiatives aimed at healings, trying to heal, trying to soften the agony this country has suffered. And we will see a whole process now over the next 100 days of mourning. The next week, people will have only half-day working, for example, because the rest of the day, the other half of the day, is allowed for reflection, for community gatherings, for thoughts about the future. This is a colossal process that's going on here. It goes on every year, but there's a special significance to the 25th.
It certainly is.
Hala.
Thank you very much. Andrew Simmons there, joining us live from Kigali. Well, let's stay with this. Simon Adams is the Executive Director of the Global Centre for the Responsibility to Protect. He joins us now live from New York. Thank you very much for your time. We have been hearing throughout the day of the impact this genocide has had on Rwanda and the Rwandans themselves. But what impact would you say it has had on the wider region or the wider world?
Sure, and thank you for having me on. So look, I think Rwanda had a huge impact on the UN, and I think it obviously covered the UN in shame. I think there's no event probably in the UN's history with the possible addition of the genocide at Srebrenica the following year that clouded the UN in more shame than what happened in Rwanda in 1994, when the UN Security Council was essentially silent and compliant, and the international community chose inaction and indifference rather than responding in a comprehensive way to what was going on. So I think in the aftermath of that, led mainly by Kofi Annan, I think there was a rethinking of what it means to have a United Nations, what it means to have an international community when it comes to these most conscience-shocking crimes. So I think that we've still got a long way to go, but I think things have hopefully improved somewhat since 1994.
Well, you say improved somewhat, but we are 25 years on, and given some of the events that we're still seeing to this day in many parts of the world, do you think these lessons have been learned? Do you think the world has learned to intervene when it needs to?
I think they've been partly learned. I think the general policy before, when faced with genocide anywhere in the world, was one, as I said, of indifference and of inaction. So, in a sense, inconsistency is a form of progress. And when we look at how the international community has responded to somewhere like the Central African Republic or South Sudan or the Congo, not genocidal situations, but situations where mass atrocities are happening, I think that's a positive thing. But of course, look at the world in which we live. Look at Syria. Look at what happened to the Rohingya minority in Myanmar, where a genocide was perpetrated in late 2017. Look at the situation in Cameroon at the moment, where the country is on fire, and we can't even get it on the agenda of the UN Security Council. So I still think there is a glaring gap between pretty words and consistent action. And obviously, I think we need to close that gap and consistently uphold our responsibility to protect people around the world when they're faced by these most conscience-shocking crimes.
And how do we close that gap? What is it that needs to be done? Do you feel in some way that this is a responsibility of world leaders, or do you think perhaps that given the violence that we see on a daily basis, perhaps people have become desensitized to this? How do we close that gap?
Well, I think there is a sense of kind of I don't know quite what to call it, but a kind of atrocity attention deficit disorder. I think the world seems chaotic to people. It can be very depressing and demoralizing for people. And so the tendency is to want to look away. But I think there is something, it's incumbent upon our leaders, it's incumbent upon the UN United Nations to not look away and to be involved. And I think if you look at the situation like that in Cameroon at the moment, or of what happened in Myanmar in 2017, and Myanmar's a very good case. There was a genocide there. We had years of early warning. We had years of reports by human rights organizations like my own talking about the persecution of the Rohingya, talking about what was happening. And then, of course, the trigger came, the genocide happened. and there was no action. And that was partly because of, the veto on the UN Security Council, which has become an impediment to acting in many of these cases. But I think I feel sometimes that the international community is still more content to mourn afterwards and to attend a commemoration service than it is to actually act in a timely and decisive way when people are facing the threat of the machete or the death squad or of the mass grave.
Okay, a sobering analysis there from Simon Adams, Director of the Global Centre for the Responsibility to Protect. Thank you very much for speaking with us on Al Jazeera today. Thank you.